Please like and subscribe. All right. Thank you. Wow, thank you. Well, hey there, ladies and germs. It's great to be here tonight. I know what you're thinking. Hey, when did the Unabombers start doing stand-up comedy? Guy looks like the Unabomber. If instead of being a master engineer, he was a stand-up comedian, and instead of being named Ted Kaczynski, he didn't wash his hands after he went to the bathroom. Hey, here's a question. Why do we wash our hands after we go to the bathroom? Isn't that a waste of time? Now stay with me here. I feel you pulling away. Don't worry. These are clean hands pulling you back in. I wash them every time I go to the bathroom. Social contract. But I'm not going to stand here and tell you I'm happy about it. I mean, fellas, when you go to the bathroom, what does it look like? Listen to me. What does it look like? Don't cancel me, okay? I'm probably about to get canceled for saying that. Look at that guy in the front row. He's like, excuse me, does this comedy club have an HR department? But seriously, folks, what do you do when you do the deed? You pull out your prig and you point and shoot. I've been doing that about as long as I remember, and I can't remember one time when one thing went wrong. When you're a kid and you get pee on yourself, what do they call it? They call it an accident. Good name. Something real wild would have to accidentally happen for the trip to the urinal to turn into a shower, you know? I mean, you're just at the toilet, you're pointing your prig, and then what happens? All of a sudden, someone accidentally throws a football at you? Oh, what's this? I'm sure it happened once. Probably some guy who had a couple of brewskis. He goes into the bathroom, and all of a sudden, there's a different yellow liquid streaming past his lips, and now it's like 9/11 just because of him. Now it's like where we all got to take off our shoes because of one jerk, and except we got to wash our hands after we touch our prigs. In fact, I bet it was my friend here in the front row. I'm just kidding, buddy. I'm just kidding. You're the best. I'm sure you weren't involved in 9/11. I know I wasn't. But for some reason, every time I go number one, step two is washing my hands. My question is why? Here's my second question. Why the heck don't we wash our prigs after they touch our hands? I mean, think about it. My prig is like the cleanest part of my body. It never touches anything except for that guy in the front row. Kidding. But I'm saying, it's clean, relatively speaking. You know what my hand touches? Literally all that which I touch. Touching is a sense experienced through the hands. I'm touching doorknobs, chicken parms, subway rails. Meanwhile, my little rail is about as clean as a Will Smith rap record. And it's my hand what gets a bath on contact. That's like brushing your teeth right before you take a swig from a brewski. I mean, it's a waste of time. Who's got time for that? I mean, I point, I shoot, I wash. Then what? I'm expected to go to work after that? I'm going to be late. And when I go to shake the boss's hand, mine's going to be slightly damp because I obviously had to wash it after touching the part of my body that is wrapped up, airtight, in 2 layers of protective fabric. It's safe from the light. No one's ever seen it. No one has ever seen it. And I'm putting my hands on... Instead of having sinks by the urinals, they should hand out gloves. They should hand out medical gloves, like when the doctor touches your prig. I'm assuming no one's ever seen my prig. I mean, a crap is one thing. Yeah, I mean, you gotta wash your hands after a crap, but still, your hands are about as dirty as a crap. But I'm just touching my prig, which no one has ever seen. Except for my friend here in the front row here, joke. He hasn't seen it. No one's seen it. My mother hasn't even seen it. That's actually how I first started thinking about all this. I was at a football game with my dad when I was about 7 or 8. We both went to the bathroom. I said, "Hey, Dad, you ever wonder why we wash our hands after we go to the bathroom?" And he says to me, "Your mother never saw your prig when you were born or even when she changed your diapers. And I said, Dad, what? And he said, neither did I. No one has seen it. My hands, on the other hand, they're the first thing you see. I say hi like this, hi. I'll wave them goodbye when I leave. And you'll clap your dirty hands together, I hope, if the show goes well. My prig? There's no hope there. No one is seeing that. People would never even see my knees if I didn't go swim at the gym every day. Every day I swim at the gym, and I change there. Of course I change there. Sorry, I hate when people ask if I change at the gym. Of course I change. The very first time I was there, I changed at the gym. I even mooned everyone in the locker room as a practical joke. I bared my butt, and I could have sworn I heard people laughing. People were into it. But then when I turned around, frontwards, everyone was gone. Everyone was gone. And that was just the first time. And I blew it. Because every time after that, when I go change in the locker room, it is empty. Every time. And I go to the locker room a lot. I go to the gym 3 times a day. I go to the locker room probably 3 times an hour whenever I'm there. No one is in there. It's exhausting. I'm constantly thinking of silent justifications like, oh, I'm about to go swim. Wait a minute, I forgot I have to pick up my daughter. I better go change. Wait a minute, I don't have a daughter. No one's seen my prig. Change back, change forth, change back, change. That's my exercise. It's a busy gym. But no one there has seen my prig. You know, there was even one time, there was this one time when I went to the locker room and I slipped on purpose. Oh, and I lied on the ground with it out. I called for help. I needed help. I hurt myself when I fell. I called an ambulance because I needed one. You know what the EMT said when he got there? He didn't. Never came. And you know what? I used to dial 911. My dirty ass hands. Oh, my dirty, trembling hands, which were clenched in fists of rage as I limped to the hospital to complain. There were these 2 women at the counter there. They were very helpful, but that made it harder somehow. By the end, they said, oh, well, that's so strange, honey. The New Jersey Department of Health said the longest response time in any county was under 20 minutes, baby. They didn't both say baby. But one of them, Lexi, was a Rubenesque Jamaican woman, and she called me baby. And when she did, I felt safe in her company as a baby, held to its mother's bosom. Her coworker, Kelsey, was also sweet. She said, oh, baby, don't cry. So I guess they did both call me baby. And together they both helped me look up the odds to see the mathematical likelihood that a person could go into the locker room 3 times a day, 3 times an hour, and never see or be seen by another person. 300,562 to 1. Kelsey said, we should take you to Vegas. And immediately, as if possessed, I said, I should take you both to dinner. That's not bad, huh? I mean, in my entire life, I can think of maybe 2 times, maybe, that I made a witty remark. That was the first. I said it with perfect timing, and at the perfect time. You see, it was only at that moment that I realized I had been standing there talking to them at their desk practically from the beginning of their shift to its end. So they're about to clock out. Kelsey looked at Lexi, and Lexi looked over at me, and she said, well, damn, baby, I can cook. And the 3 of us walked to Lexi's 1-bedroom apartment. They walked, I limped, with an arm over each of their shoulders. Kelsey's shoulders were firm and supple. And when I touched them, I felt that, I don't know, I just had this image in my head, like that must have been what it felt like when Eve held the apple in her hand, which she couldn't help but bite. That's the way the apple felt. Lexi's shoulders felt good too. They made me think of French vanilla, but that was probably just her lotion that conjured that thought. And when we got to her apartment, guess what I used to turn the doorknob? My hands. And when I turned the knob, I saw dirt underneath my fingernails, and I was worried that they were going to judge me. But guess what I saw when our triad went inside. Squalor. An unmade bed and dirty dishes piled on top of a hot plate which seemed dangerously close to the unmade bed. Kelsey and I felt embarrassed for Lexi and offered to run across the street to a grocer's. We're going to buy some soap, some sponges, and the ingredients to make a chicken parm. But as we were turning to exit the door, Lexi's voice rang out from behind saying, "Dinner is served." Lexi, it turned out, was something of an exhibitionist. Why wouldn't she be, with a body like that? Her velvet skin was as dark as her hair, which hung all the way down her back. I wondered for a moment if Kelsey knew that about her, if she knew that her coworker was an exhibitionist. Perhaps this was even a routine occurrence for the two of them. But when I managed briefly to pry my eyes from Lexi's thighs, I saw that Kelsey's jaw was hanging just about to the floor. And I felt my own jaw begin to move without my consent. You see, up until that point, I had never actually seen anyone naked except for myself. So, as what I suppose you would call a nervous reaction, I began to laugh. And when I began to laugh, Lexi became instantly furious, cursing at me in a rage, cursing at me in a language which I assume was Jamaican. I hope it wasn't tongues. Kelsey rushed onto the bed to comfort her. She said, "Oh, baby, don't cry." She'd really taken to the term. And with the tip of her finger, she traced a tear down Lexi's cheek and guided it up towards her lips, which looked soft, so soft. Kelsey said, "Make a wish," as though it were an eyelash. I suppose she was pretending it was an eyelash. The eroticism of the gesture superseded its logic. And Lexi played right into it, saying, "It already came true, baby." I remember thinking that was a witty remark in the moment. And I remember how Lexi's lips welcomed Kelsey's finger and the way her tongue twisted to taste her French tips. I said, "You better wash that hand first. That French tip may be dirty as a French anything else." They said nothing to me. They said nothing at all, except, or, "Oh," or perhaps the other's name, "Oh, Kelsey, oh, Lexi." It all seemed so seamless. You know, they had loved working together for those long years. Now in an instant, longing had turned them to lovers. It was hours before they began speaking in earnest, and even then, it was sweet nothings to one another. A lover's pastime, which I knew nothing about. That frothy sort of conversation which makes more sense to a tongue tired from kissing. Would you rather burn alive or be drowned to death? If you could go anywhere in the world, who would you take with you? Do you believe time is circular or linear? Linear, obviously. Then how is it I met you 6 years ago, and I feel like I'm seeing you now for the first time? Baby? Oh, stop. No, I really mean it. I mean, what happened to all that time? Did it just disappear? Could we really have wasted those 6 years? Or were we already here together the whole time we were back there? Baby? And Kelsey said, "Oh, baby." And I said, "You know what's a real waste of time? Washing your hands after you take a piss. Am I right? I mean, less so for you, I suppose for the ladies. It's a real mess." And Lexi said, "Wow, you really need to work on your small talk, baby." And I said, "Maybe all I need is someone to work on my small talk with." And of course, that wasn't a witty reply. Like I said, I've had 2 in my life. Maybe. That was not one. But they laughed. I remember they laughed at me. I'll never forget it. I blew it, you see. I knew that I blew it. I knew what that felt like. So I left Kelsey and Lexi to blow one another in that disgusting Jamaican apartment. And I walked the earth, angry and unseen. And everywhere I went, I heard their laughter. I heard their horrible laughter. I heard it everywhere. I heard it in the giggles of children at play. I heard it in the sneeze of a dog. I heard it rolling off the tongue of every pair of lovers that passed. And all I wanted was for them to be quiet. I thought the world has had its laugh at my expense, and I wanted it to stop. I wanted to put an end to laughter. Saying that now, I don't even know what it means. But I kept saying it over and over like a crazy person. And I was a crazy person. I would go in and out of consciousness and wake up in strange bathrooms saying, I want to put an end to laughter, just like that. It happened all the time. It happened here. I woke up in this comedy club, which was a desanctified church, and I had my little peen in one hand, and I had a ball peen hammer in the other. And I was peeing. God, was I peeing? God, was it yellow? And God, was I peeing? And you know what? I still didn't splash. Now, that made me laugh. And then it made me scream. And when I screamed, I, of course, screamed, I want to put an end to laughter. And it was then that I noticed there was a comic behind me, a stand-up comedian. And he said, well, you came to the right place. But I could hardly hear him over the laughter booming in from the crowd and the screaming in my head. So I took my hammer in my hand, and I started walking towards the door. I don't know what I would have done to whoever was on the other side of it if the comic hadn't said, wait a minute, and then tapped a sign which said all employees must watch hands, and then the word employees had been crossed out, and it said nice people with a smiley face. I said to him, hey, why do we have to wash our hands when we go to the bathroom? Isn't that a waste of time? I mean, you whip out your prig, you point and shoot. I've been doing that as long as I remember, and I can't remember one time when one thing went wrong. And the comic said, that could be something. You should do that on stage. I said, really? That's funny to you? He said, sure, it could be. I mean, work on it. Like, maybe give some examples. Like, what would have to accidentally go wrong for you to have an accident? You're holding your prick, and someone tosses you a football, maybe. And I say prig. He said, yeah, well, make it your own. Maybe say it was maybe there was one guy who really had an accident, and he just messed it up for the rest of us. Now it's like the Unabomber where we all have to take our shoes off at the airport because of one guy, who you kind of look like, by the way. No offense. I said, none taken. And the comic said, maybe open with that. People love a joke about what you look like. Like I have red hair and man tits. So I may open with a joke like, hey, I know what you're thinking. Ronald's been eating McDonald's. I mean, I wouldn't open with that because I'm not a hack, but you should think about it. It might make people feel more comfortable around you. Either way, you should probably write a couple jokes that aren't about your dick, if you ever want a woman to touch it again. I said, what do you mean again? He said, that's funny. And I said, not to me. And then I told him. About me and my prig and how no one has seen it. And then he started laughing. And I raised my ball peen hammer over his head, and he said, wait a minute, kid. Here, give me a chance to save both our lives. And I said, go on. He said, you know what would be fucking hilarious? I said, I don't. I've made maybe one witty remark in my life. The comic said, you got to go on stage and tell them everything you just told me. I said, but everyone will laugh. He said, I seriously doubt that, but, that's why it's going to be the funniest thing that ever happened. Because after you tell them everything you just told me, you know what you're going to do? I said, not at all. He said, you're going to yank out your prig for all to see. I said, I am? And the comic said, if there is a God, yes, you are going to do this, and I'm going to watch. And I said, but won't I get arrested? And the comic said, you are at maximum 1 hour away from getting arrested, no matter what happens here. But before that happens, and it will, wouldn't you like for someone to see your prig? I washed my hands. The comic convinced the host to introduce me. Thank you, by the way, to Robbie Goodwin, who's a hilarious comic. Then I walked out on stage, and I started to tell my story. And there was a bit of laughter at first, but then it got very, very quiet. Very much how it is right now. And I looked out at the crowd, and I locked eyes with every pair of eyes, 2 by 2, as my hand moved inch by inch closer to my belt. And then, finally, as I caught the last pair of eyes in the last seat in the front row, I saw the whitest pair of eyes you've ever seen. No pupils in them. And I thought to myself, wow, now that's funny. This man is totally blind, and yet he has this smile that could light up a room. And then I thought to myself, that's funny. So I said it to him. I said, the thing of that's funny. You're totally blind, but you have this smile that could light up a room. It was probably the second time in my life that I'd thought of a witty remark in the moment. And he laughed. He did. And I thought to myself, wow. I never want him to stop laughing. And you know what? He pretty much hasn't. I took him back to my apartment that night. I made him a chicken parm, and then I made love to him for hours.
Oh, thank God.
That's right, ladies and germs.
Oh, for sure.
No. Now, he may not know what my prig looks like, but he sure knows how to suck it dry. He sucked it perfectly, and at the perfect time. You see, it was only at that moment, after he'd finished, that I knew exactly how to make small talk with him. I knew the exact questions to ask. I had learned that lover's language which eluded me. He'd rather burn alive than drown. He would take his mother to see the Eiffel Tower. She'd see it. And when I asked him if he thought time was linear or circular, he said, "Who gives a shit?" And I said, "Not me, so long as I get to spend it with you." And ladies and germs, let's give a big hand because we're all spending time with him right now. Ladies and gentlemen, bring your filthy hands together for my friend here in the front row.
Oh, thank God. Oh, yeah. Look at his eyes.
He can't. There's no way he could. Not even if time was circular. He was born fucked up. And that's our son on his lap. 1 of 2. That's our youngest, okay? And our oldest, ladies and germs, is a professional football player. That's right, we're rich. Why, I'll never forget, a little while back, he was winning the Super Bowl, and I had to take a piss. So I went into the locker room, and all of a sudden, I started to feel like my husband because I was hearing a sound at a hyper-amplified level. And if you know me, you know why that's crazy, because, I never heard any sound in a locker room before. It was the sound of footsteps. I was going to the toilet. I almost had an accident. I said, "Who's there?" My son said, "It's me, Daddy. It's Eli." He just hopped right over to the urinal next to mine, pulled out his prig, and shot up the bowl. I said, "Son, this is a great Super Bowl. I wish your father could see this. You'll never understand how proud we are of you." He said, "You know what I'll never understand? How come we gotta wash our hands after We touch our prigs. I said, what did you say? He said, I'm just saying. Doesn't that seem like a waste of time? That's how I heard it when those words fell from my son's lips. And I experienced time collapsing in on itself. I went somewhere, I don't know where, but time was beneath me. I was looking down at it, spread out in a big circle. I could see my own back as I walked up to take a piss at the Super Bowl. I could see my son on one side of me, and I could see my father on the other, telling me my mother had never seen my prig. And as I stood there, with my prig in my hand, I was looking down at Lexi and Kelsey, looking at one another with the same love which I'd not yet found in my husband's broken eyes. Yet I could feel in that moment that his love was already there. Then I heard my son's voice, Dad, Dad. Then I felt my son slack me back conscious. Dad, are you okay? I said, don't worry, son. This kind of shit used to happen to your old man all the time. As I rolled on the ground, covered in my own very dehydrated piss. There was a Super Bowl towel covering my prig. Of course there was. My son said, I'm so sorry, Dad. You know, we were talking at the urinal, and as a joke, I tossed you a football, and I guess I forgot that I have a 2.27 second release time. I said, I know. Eli said, yeah, the fastest average time before that was 2.36. And I said, no, son, I know. I know everything. I know why we have to wash our hands after we go pee. And Eli said, why, Dad? And then Eli got very, very quiet. Very much how you all are right now. And I looked up into his regular pupilled eyes, very healthy. And I said, because when you pee, there are pee-pee particles.